Welcome to Around the Clock Frights. Today, we're going to be talking about a horror movie set in Texas. As if that weren't scary enough, it's another sequel to The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original horror classic released in 1974, and honestly, instead of talking about this movie, I'd rather go out and eat some Famous Dave's barbecue. Some barbecued ribs sound really good right now, because honestly, this movie kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. So I'm here to talk about this new movie. It's a reboot, slash sequel. It's basically what we call a legacy sequel. 2018's Halloween did this. It was a legacy sequel. It ignored all the other films in the franchise, and it was a direct continuation of the original 1978 Halloween, and Netflix and Legendary Pictures decided, hey, you know what, we should do that too. So they whipped together a script, and they grabbed the producer of Don't Breathe and the Evil Dead remake and said, hey, can you assemble a team and give us another cheaply made Texas Chainsaw sequel? And here we are, Texas Chainsaw 2022. So before I get into my overall thoughts on this movie, and trust me, there are going to be some pretty dang entertaining thoughts, I want to talk a little bit about my feelings on the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series as a whole. So the first film, it was a very grounded, very realistic slasher film. It was honestly so gritty. It looked like a documentary. Like, it was almost handheld at times. It felt like someone was holding a camera and was following this group of young people around as they were being torn apart by these, psychopaths in Texas. The rest of the series, starting with Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, also directed by Tobe Hooper, honestly turned the craziness up to 11, because each sequel just got crazier, more bonkers, they added more gore, and none of them came as close to being as good as the original. And after a long period of time, they just got more and more ridiculous, including the 2003 remake produced by Michael Bay. And see, the thing is that a lot of those films miss the point of the original. The original was meant to be, a very grounded, realistic, look at what would happen if you ran across a group of psychopaths in the middle of nowhere.
No, sir, I didn't like it.
First of all, it's too good looking. Like, the cinematography for this movie is very sleek. It's actually very well shot, especially for a movie of this caliber. Like, the cinematography is aces here, folks. The problem is that doesn't match the original film's tone, because the original film, again, was almost like a documentary. So here's this film, this beautiful looking film, and it just... So you have this annoying band of SJW social media influencers who have purchased this ghost town, out in Texas, and they basically want to make the world a better place. They have invited investors there, and they basically want to turn this abandoned town into a place where young hipsters like themselves can thrive, I guess. Anyway, that's the plot. And the characters in this movie, oh my god. If you took some of the more obnoxious characters found in Rob Zombie films and, let's say, Eli Roth films, and just threw them all into a single film, then you'd have Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2022, because the social justice warriors in this film reminded me of the annoying fucktwats in Eli Roth's Green Inferno. They think they're out to make the world a better place, but they're so condescending, they're so pretentious, and I couldn't stand a single one of them. Even the main character, played by Elsie Fisher, who was in the phenomenal teen drama 8th Grade, there's this very confusing anti-gun message, and it just doesn't belong in this film. Elsie Fisher is the survivor of a high school shooting, and she keeps having flashbacks to when she saw these, dead bodies in the hallways at her school, and it doesn't belong here. So I don't know what they were trying to accomplish there. That was one of the subplots in this movie. But anyway, how do they come across Leatherface? Basically, they enter this supposedly abandoned orphanage where they come across none other than Alice Krieg. Alice Krieg played the creepy old witch in Gretel and Hansel, and she was actually very effective in that movie. Here, she's on screen for maybe 5 minutes, because it turns out that she was the owner of this orphanage, and she's been raising, lost boys there for decades, including Leatherface, which, by the way, I really question that. So apparently, this film makes it clear that Leatherface was put in this orphanage at a young age, I think after the events of the first film, but in the first film, I don't think he was a young boy or a teenager. He looked like a full-grown adult. He had a very built body, so that was very confusing. And why did they put him in this orphanage? Did they just take him away from his family? I mean, I guess if, Sally Hardesty, the survivor of the first film, reported, what happened to her in that film, I guess the authorities probably would have been able to track them down, but it's established in this movie that Sally was never able to find Leatherface, so that plot point didn't make much sense. Anyway, I'm going to get into some minor spoilers here. So basically, Alice Krieg, insists that the orphanage is still hers, but she has a heart attack, she dies, Leatherface becomes very upset, and he basically goes on a murderous rampage. And, okay, I will say this. The film, apart from having some pretty decent cinematography, does have a couple of entertaining sequences. Like, there's a sequence inside a party bus, which has been, highlighted in the trailer, and he basically just, for lack of a better term, massacres these young hipsters, and, it's all been recorded, on a live stream, and you're seeing these comments from random internet users. I think there was one comment that was like, bro, that looks just so fake, and I will admit, it was an entertaining sequence, and they did go all out with the gore in this movie. Like, the violence was very over the top, which, again, the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, very minimalistic. There was next to no gore in that film, but there is bloodshed everywhere, and if that's what you're looking for, as a gore hound, then that's fine. This film will probably whet your appetite. But for me, I have so much respect for the original film. I have respect for the type of film it was, and this film, like so many of the other Texas Chainsaw Massacre sequels, just doesn't understand what made it so effective. It wasn't about the bloodshed. It wasn't about, the horrific acts of violence. It was about the realism. The realism is what made the original film so memorable and so compelling. These sequels, including this new film, just have never gotten it. Yeah, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. Again, directed by Tobe Hooper, it was an entertaining movie, but it was a borderline satire. Like that film, the poster for that film is a parody of the fucking Breakfast Club. So Tobe Hooper obviously wasn't making a serious sequel, and that leads me to another point. So this film brings back two classic characters, the first being Leatherface, the other being Sally Hardesty, a much older Sally Hardesty, and they're obviously trying to do the Laurie Strode thing, how in Halloween 2018, they brought in Jamie Lee Curtis to reprise her famous role, but here's the thing. Sally Hardesty, the character of Sally Hardesty, is no Laurie Strode. We spent numerous films with Laurie Strode, throughout the Halloween franchise. She wasn't just the victim in the first film. She showed up in the direct sequel, Halloween 2. She showed up in Halloween H2O. She showed up in Halloween Resurrection, even though they killed her off in that film. She was talked about numerous times in Halloween 4 and Halloween 5, so we got to spend more time with Laurie. Sally was, a tragic victim of circumstance in the first film, but let's just be honest, guys. She is no Laurie Strode. She is not this, iconic, amazing horror protagonist. She was the sole survivor of a slasher film. And in this movie, she barely does anything. We see her in a couple of scenes, which, by the way, it's not even the same actress. It's someone completely different. So this film is trying to make us all excited about a returning character, and it isn't even the same actress. And what they do with her in this movie, it leaves almost no impact because we barely spend any time with her. When we first see her, her introduction scene, she is butchering a pig, which could have been a very cool, badass introductory sequence, but then she does almost nothing. She shows up in another scene where she's, exploring, the site of these grisly murders, out in the middle of this field, and then she shows up for the big showdown between Leatherface, which doesn't even last that long, and this film is asking us to become so invested in Sally as a character, when honestly, they barely do anything with her in this movie. The reason why 2018 Halloween was so effective was because it had a good emotional center. We spent a lot of time with Laurie Strode, told us, what she's been up to in the decades leading up to, the events of that film. She has been haunted by her encounter with Michael Myers. It has ruined her entire life. It has severed her relationship with her friends and family. So at Halloween 2018, it had its faults. It could be goofy as hell, but it still had a pretty compelling, emotional center. We cared about Laurie Strode and her struggles. We don't care about Sally in this movie. At least I didn't, because that's another thing too. This movie, it clearly wants us to root for Leatherface. You know, the reason they probably made these characters so irritating was because they wanted us to root for Leatherface. And yeah, they kind of succeeded at that, but the thing is, Leatherface from the beginning was never meant to be this immortal supernatural monster. He was supposed to be like an Ed Gein. He was supposed to be like a Ted Bundy. He was supposed to be a representation of these famous serial killers at the time. And they tried to turn him, and they turned him into this like immortal horror icon, which yes, he does have a very striking design, but that's not who Leatherface was in the first film. And this film is meant to be a direct sequel to the first film. So at the end, when they supposedly kill him off, I mean, spoilers, I guess. I mean, you know, whenever they kill a famous horror icon in these movies, of course they never stay dead. This isn't realistic. This is just stupid. This is just over the top and stupid.
Whoa, take it easy, sweetheart.
Like I mentioned earlier, hardcore fans of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series will probably enjoy this. I've read reviews from fellow horror fans on social media, and a good number of them are enjoying it. And it was released by Netflix, so they didn't have to worry about how much bloodshed they could get away with, because there are some grisly, gnarly sequences, and to be fair, there are a couple of creative kills, but they don't serve a higher purpose. You know, I saw the new Scream movie, the one that came out this year, and there was a part where they talked about the state of modern horror and how we have all of these requels, you know, reboot/sequels. They tend to bring in older actors, you know, to please fans of the older films and their franchises. And they usually have the older actors interacting with all these new characters because they want to, you know, bring in new fans. And you know, this film follows, you know, films like, you know, the new Scream, Halloween 2018, Halloween Kills, the new Candyman that came out in 2021. But here's the thing. Many of those films were still very, you know, well written. They were well conceived. And some of them even continued, you know, the storylines in their franchises very effectively, or in a very creative ways. This film, apart from a couple of grisly sequences, has almost nothing to offer, and there are just pointless subplots, and there's, man, some very confusing writing. Like, did I mention they come across this redneck character early on in the film at a gas station, and at first it kind of feels as if we're supposed to hate this character, like he's supposed to be, you know, this imposing antagonistic character, but then he turns out to be more of a hero, like in the second half of the film. And that also ties back to the anti-gun message, because at the end of the movie, you know, when shit hits the fan, it felt like guns were absolutely essential. So this film, what was it saying? What was it trying to do? The writing was very, very sloppy, but just one of my many complaints. Like I said, guys, if you know, are just looking for a horror film filled with explicit gore and not much else, you'll probably get a kick out of this. But for someone like myself, I'm just seeing hundreds upon hundreds of slasher films, and when a film like this comes along that has nothing new to offer except for some entertaining gory bits, then it just leaves me feeling bored. I guess bored is the right way to describe it. And yeah, those are my overall thoughts on Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2022. As you can tell, I didn't have the greatest time watching this film. I just, yeah. No, sir, I didn't like it. It reminded me of a famous quote by George Lucas. After seeing the Star Wars Holiday Special, George Lucas said in an interview, if I had time in a sledgehammer, I would track down every copy and smash it. Yeah, if I had time in a sledgehammer, I would track down every TV showing this film and smash it. So I would probably have to track down millions of TVs across America because a lot of people are subscribed to Netflix right now. Anyway, guys, those are my overall thoughts on Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2022. Yeah, it just wasn't for me. And, you know, I've seen plenty of gory films that have tickled my fancy, you know. I'm not opposed to gore. It's just this film, it just angered me in a lot of ways, mostly because of the lame writing. But if you're looking for gore, you'll find it here. It's along the lines of Terrifier, which is also on Netflix. That is a wow. That is a bonkers film. That film is so gory. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me in my discussion of Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2022. Of course, I want to hear your thoughts on it as well. You know, what do you think of all these legacy sequels that have been coming out recently? Like, do you have a favorite one? For me personally, I probably would go with the 2018 Halloween. I thought that film was actually pretty well done, and yeah. I can't wait to see Halloween Ends this year. That's going to be really exciting. But yes, if you liked this, go and subscribe to my channel, Round the Clock Frights. We have some more horrific content coming out soon, and 2022 has plenty of exciting horror titles, you know, coming out later this year. We have Halloween Ends, as mentioned earlier. We have The Cursed. We have The Black Phone, directed by Scott Derrickson, adapted from a Joe Hill story. But yes, again guys, thank you so much again, and have a very scary night, and stay away from, I would say just stay away from Texas in general, and go enjoy some barbecue. I know that's what I'm probably going to do. I'm probably going to go grab some barbecue, maybe some ribs, some cornbread. Oh wow, I definitely have an appetite for some meat. Don't take that the wrong way. Have a good night guys, take care, and stay scary, boys and ghouls.